Welcome to Selkirkshire, the historic county in the Scottish borders, and it's here that once stood the mighty Carterhaugh forest, but now it's long gone. In Black's picturesque tourist guide of Scotland from the 1840s, there's a very melancholy line that mentions this old woodland. The whole of this tract of the country was, not many centuries ago, covered with wood, and its popular designation still is the forest. A native of Selkirk, who died about 80 years ago at an advanced age, used to tell that he'd seen a person older than himself, who said he had in his time walked from the town of Ettrick, a distance of 18 miles, and never once all the way escaped from the shadow of the trees. Of this primeval forest, no vestige is now to be seen. This forest is now not even a memory, but merely a whisper, and a footnote in dusty old books. But for today, let's imagine that this mighty forest still stands. We'll go centuries into the past to hear the tale of Tam Lin. There was once a young man named Tam Lin, grandson of the Laird of Roxburgh in the Scottish borderlands. A fine and handsome gentleman, and he went out hunting in the great forest of Carterhaugh in Selkirkshire, but fell from his horse and suffered terrible injuries. He lay there on the forest floor, crying out for help, but there was not another human soul for miles around. As chance would have it, though, there was someone that heard his calls. The Queen of the Fairies saw him and took pity, but also took great interest. She revived the young Tam Lin, and made him a powerful knight of the fairy realm, a rare honour for a human. The Queen bestowed upon him the task of protecting the forest that he had entered as a hunter, Carterhaugh. Some might consider this to be a reward. After all, his life had been saved. Yet, the fairies offered no such gift out of the kindness of their hearts. Tam Lin was their prisoner, and, although a knight, was not uncertain of his position, a man held captive by the fairies. The people of the area knew all too well that Tam Lin guarded these woods, and so made it their business to stay clear, and none heeded this message more than protective parents of girls. For if Tam Lin encountered a young woman in Carterhaugh, he would only let them pass on by if they granted him a great treasure, or their most precious treasure of all, their very maidenhood. Now this tale was all very well known to the young heroine of our story, a girl by the name of Janet. She was the daughter of a very powerful earl that lived on the outskirts of this once mighty forest. Some say she lived in the Tower of Newark, and others say it was Oakwood Tower. Regardless though, her father had made it very clear for years that she was to stay clear of those trees, and had been honest about the reason why. And yet, Janet decided one day to enter, bored of her life being confined to her father's castle with little to no excitement. Whether or not she truly believed in the tale of Tam Lin is unknown, but it was undeniable that Janet hoped in the back of her mind that there was some truth to this romantic story, even though another part of her thought that tales of fairies were simply made up to frighten children. She was overcome with a sense of awe and wonder, her eyes taking in the beautiful sights of nature, and her nose taking in all the scents of the raw, untamed forest. I'm walking along a paved road. There's electricity pylons next to me and a plane just went by overhead. This is the modern world. But back in Janet's day, this all would have been part of the forest. And she was in this exact area. She hadn't been walking 5 minutes when she saw something here, a stone well. And it just so happens that stone well is right here. This is Tam Lins Well. Actually, the original well was, or is, 2.5 meters behind this spot, covered by the wall and the earth, but a metal pipe still lets the water flow out and into the stone trough. Not many people know about this spot, and if you drove past, you wouldn't even notice it. But someone has left an offering here, so clearly the legend isn't as unknown as it may seem. But this is the spot that Janet was drawn to, and here she saw the most beautiful roses. Fancying that they'd look lovely in her golden hair, she picked one, and then picked another. But within a moment, a voice spoke from behind her, and told her not to touch another rose. There before her stood a rather magnificent man, tall and bold. It was Tam Lin, the elven knight, staying true to the duties bestowed upon him by the fairy queen all those years ago. "And who are you to tell me to stop? This is my father's land, I'll have you know," replied Janet confidently. "I'll come and go as I please. He has gifted these woods to me. I need not your permission to do so." Tam Lin had never seen a woman so confident before, and became smitten instantly. Janet, likewise, had found what she was looking for. When she left the forest later that day, she was no longer a maiden, and she knew that she was carrying his child. Of course, she was terrified to tell her father about the encounter that she'd had that day, and tried to hide her baby for as long as possible. But her belly grew, and her garments could no longer hide the fact that she was obviously pregnant. Naturally, rumours circled, and all of the Earl's men made sure to keep their distance from the girl, lest it be thought that they were a secret lover. Janet's father, the Earl, was furious when he found out, as was to be expected. He demanded to know which of his men were responsible for this, his mind already filled with thoughts of all that he'd do to punish the scoundrel. Janet protested, explaining that the man she was with was not one of his earthly soldiers, but instead was an elven knight, the same knight that guards the Carterhaugh forest. And what's more, Janet said that she would not trade the love of any man in the land for the love that she bore the knight from the fairy realm. The Earl seemed to believe her story, but was still furious that this had happened. All those years spent telling her that the forest was to be avoided, and now this. He ordered Janet to return to Carterhaugh once more, and collect herbs and plants that could be used to flush out the child and avoid any further humiliation or trouble. Janet was strong-willed, but was sensible enough not to push her father on this, so she did as she was told and returned, but not to find the herbs, rather to find her elven lover once more. She ventured back to the well, where she'd plucked the 2 roses all those months ago, and then she plucked another 2. Tam Lin, the handsome knight, again appeared, as he had done before, but this time he was with a beautiful white horse. Yet he looked troubled, and asked young Janet why she was trying to get rid of the baby that grew inside her. She explained her dilemma and the problems she faced now that she was carrying a child. Tam Lin was sympathetic, and he wished there was something he could do to help. Since their first meeting, Janet had been the only thing on his mind, and he had grown to love her and wanted nothing more than to be with her and to be a father to this baby. But Janet didn't understand why he couldn't, and so Tam Lin began to explain who he was and why he was in the forest. "I fell from my horse here many years ago, and I cannot remember what it was that caused me to fall. I suspect it may have been the hidden hand of the fairy queen, for when I woke, I was under the big green mound and trapped in the realm of the fairies. By day, I'm tasked to guard this forest, and by night, I return to the queen's side, where she maintains a close eye on me. I long to live a mortal life again, and be with you for the remainder of my days." Janet was deeply moved by Tam Lin's story, but the worst was yet to come. His air of sadness turned to fear. "Every 7 years," he said, "the fairies must sacrifice one of their own to the fires as a tithe to the underworld. It's been 7 years now since the last sacrifice. I fear that as I'm now fair in looks and strong in body, that I am to be the next sacrifice. I fear that the reason I was taken by the fairies was for this very purpose." Janet pleaded, "There must be something I can do to free you." "There is a way," replied Tam Lin. "Every Samhain, at the stroke of midnight, the fairies ride out upon the earth, led by the queen herself. The veil between the worlds is thinnest then. If a fairy has a true love, she must wait out at Mile Cross, and this will be a one and only chance to free him from the fairies." "But how will I know which night is you?" asked Janet. Tam Lin explained that the first elven knight shall pass on a black horse, and the second shall pass on a brown horse. He will be the rider of the third horse, the white one. His hair will be combed down beneath his cocked hat, and he'll wear a single glove, leaving the other hand bare. For the curse to be broken, Janet must pull down Tam Lin from the horse and wrestle him to the ground. The fairy magic that controls him will then force his transformation into some terrible forms, the final incarnation being a red-hot coal, which must be thrown into the well. If she lets go at any point, then Tam Lin would never again rejoin the realm of men. And of course, that day was Samhain, and so all of this was to take place that evening. It's the location of this Miles Cross that had me puzzled, though. The location where Janet was told to go and interrupt the fairy procession. There's no Miles Cross marked on any map, and I knew that I needed to seek out a crossroads or a bridge of some kind. But then I decided to turn to Sir Walter Scott, the man that preserved so many of these old stories. He wrote in Minstrelsy of the Scottish Borders, Miles Cross, perhaps a corruption of Mary's Cross, where fair Janet waited the arrival of the fairy train, is said to have stood near the Duke of Buccleuch's seat of Bowhill, about half a mile from Carterhaugh, and, lo and behold, about half a mile to the west from Carterhaugh Farm and Tam Lins Well, is the Carterhaugh Bridge, with the road leading in 4 different directions. This is the spot I believe where Janet was told to wait. This is the Miles Cross. And wait she did, with bated breath. And at midnight, the party of fairies rode out from the undergrowth, the sound of bridles tinkling and horses' hooves filling the air. First, the imposing queen of the fairies passed her by, followed by the rider of the black horse, and then the rider of the brown horse. But next came Tam Lin, riding his white mount, just as he had said. Janet wasted no time. She lunged for Tam Lin and pulled him down from the horse, wrapping her arms around him tightly. Within seconds, he transformed into a hideous snake, his tail coiling around Janet and getting tighter. But she held on. Next, he changed into a bear and tried to savage the young girl, but still she held on tightly. Then the bear changed into a lion, but Janet closed her eyes and didn't let go. Finally, the lion vanished, and in its place was a burning hot coal. Despite the searing pain, Janet held on and threw it into the well where she had first met Tam Lin. She ran over to it and found her lover lying there naked. She wrapped her green cloak over him to shield his nakedness. The fairy queen was furious. Her knight, her sacrifice, had been snatched away from her, right before she paid the tithe that was owed that evening. Had I known that my elven knight had fallen for a mortal girl like you, I'd have taken your eyes and left wood in their place, she snarled. But it was too late. Tam Lin had crossed the threshold and returned to the land of mortals. No more was he under the control of the fairies.